So we're hiking up the mountain, and there's an older woman ahead of us who, at the first part of the hike, seemed to be hiking kind of slow. So we passed her, like we had to get to the frickin' lake. You know, it's at the trailhead, is 3 miles to the lake, it's a Ptarmigan Lake trail, get to the lake. And this woman is, you know, slow in front of us at first. And, you know, we're from Texas, where it's sea level. So she might have had a little more endurance than we did, even though we might have had a little more youth on our side initially. She had longevity on her side in more ways than one. And as we were hiking up the mountain, you know, with our sights kind of set on, yes, there's some beautiful scenery. You know, I'm not totally goal-oriented. But I have some of that personality type. And so we decide, well, oh, look, here's a little pretty stream. At which point, older woman comes up the trail and pulls off to the side and starts to tell us about the different wildflowers that we were seeing. And she said, well, do you know the name of this one? You know, like we're from Texas. No. And she tells us the name of that one. And then, do you know this one? And I was like, no. So the story goes on like that. And she spent a nice amount of time telling us about all of the flowers. And it was really this incredible moment at this point of the story. She said, you know, they're really coming on right now. They're really, really quite glorious. She said, I lie in bed in the middle of the winter, and I imagine these flowers deep underneath the snow. And I wait all winter for this time of year, and I hike this trail every week, from the beginning, before they start to bloom, until the last one goes. Because I know them by name. I know what they're going to look like, and I've waited all winter. I've lying awake in my cabin in bed, waiting to see these flowers. And we're like, what did you say this one was called? You know, so all of a sudden the flowers are, you know, they get a little bit more interesting to us, and we're getting kind of inspired. And so we're going to stay at the, you know, we're also kind of tired halfway up this hill. And, so she goes on ahead and actually gets to the lake before us. And that's not the point of the story, but that is an interesting side note. And then, and I'm dying, you know, by the time I'm up there at the mountain, I'm like, all I've got in my mind is like lunch. And I'm telling Kelly, we're not going on the rest of that hike over beyond the lake. We're just getting to the lake. I'm going to see the lake. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to eat my piece of quiche from the coffee roasters, and I'm going to like go back down. I've got my sights. I'm going to finish this thing. So there we are. I'm like, I'm up there, and lo and behold, across the lake, looking at this like boulder field, is this woman, transfixed, still. And we're like, what is she doing? Is she like meditating, looking at the rocks? I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to eat my food, you know. And then, so she calls us over. Like she says, Ptarmigan, and we're like, Ptarmigan Lake, yeah, you know. She's waving to us. And I'm like, God, okay, so I have to hike some more, which I swore I wasn't going to do because I'm tired, you know. She was slowing me down earlier. But so then, anyway, long story, not as long as it could be. Short story, not as long as it could be. She's standing there looking, and what she sees is are the families of the ptarmigans. They are these birds that are camouflaged against the rocks. And even in one of the guidebooks we read about Ptarmigan Lake, you know, they called them the elusive ptarmigan birds. She says, I've been hiking this trail, what did she say, 30 times or 30 years?
Yeah, maybe 3 times.
And she's seen these birds up there 3 times in all of the times that she's hiked this trail. And she showed us how to see them in these rocks. And it took being up there, being quiet, being still, and willing to wait and to see them in the ways that they were hidden. And then her generosity to share her discovery with us. And our discomfort to get off, my discomfort to like keep hiking when I was tired, which I surrendered. I'm whining more than, well, I was whining. And and I got to thinking about how like, it's a lot like yoga. Because every yoga teacher says that. Because there's a whole series of poses, there's like lists of them in the books, and there's snapshots, and they're on Instagram these days, and everywhere you look, there's like, I want to do that pose, I want to check it off the list, I'm going to hike, it says 3 miles to that lake, and that's the lake is the point of my hike. And the thing is that longevity in practice starts to show us that when we slow down, when we start to learn what is the pathway to the pose, what's along the pathway, how are we in the process of climbing our own mountains towards the postures instead of like destination only. The pose is not the point. It's like what actually was the richness of that particular hike was all of the things that we learned on the way. Are we lying awake in bed at night thinking about our practice in such a way about what is asleep inside me underneath the surface, getting its nurturing and in its fallow stages, what is going to wake up in the springtime of my own practice that I can't see now? How will I recognize it? Will I know myself by my own name when that time comes in the spring? Will I be able to delight in the ways that I blossom? Will I be able to share those dawnings of insight that I found on the pathway to the pose with someone else so that their path is richer, that they know the path better, they know the sights better? Will I turn around and say, hey, I found this, maybe you could look here, come over here, or okay, you do that. And so we can get very goal-oriented in yoga, and it's so many of us type A types are attracted to the practice, and there's a lot of that to be had in yoga. Goal-oriented people make great progress in yoga. Check a bunch of stuff off. It's wonderful. Lots of rigor, lots of discipline is required. A lot of tenacity is required for progress on the path. And yet, the more times that we walk the pathway to these poses, hopefully we're starting to see all the things that are making the path actually really quite interesting, and the lake was the least of it that day. And the pose, when you have a pose you lust for, once you get it, you're still the same person. You just touched your foot on your head, or you just touched your toes on your hands to the floor, or whatever it is, because it'll always move, It's like, or are you the same person? Did the pathway to the pose transform us in such a way that we aren't the same, and we see that the pose was not the point ever? The pose just was what we set our sights on so that we could find an interesting way to walk together.